Hi there, Frank here from Remek, and in this video we're going to look at the Remek Momentum Standalones, our main strategy product, from a slightly different angle, from the angle of the software designer and the trader. And I hope this little walkthrough will help you understand the product better and to understand better how you can put this to best use in your own trading practice. I'd like to start by saying that we're not going to go into all the details because then this video would be a bit too lengthy. So let me refer you to our documentation on our website. So when you go to remek.ca, you can go to welcome. All you need is a free membership. Just go to the strategy product, to the standalones. And when you click here, there's a user manual, otherwise called a documentation, which describes the product, of course, in detail. And there's one chapter, technical specifications, which really goes deep into the settings and explains, like any software product documentation would, explains each and every setting in detail. So if you ever find that you're not sure what a certain setting does, just hop on this page, and for both ProSTR and also for BT, our twin product of both are basically the manifestations of the same trading methodology under NinjaTrader 8. So all these settings are explained here, and you can refer to this page at any time. Again, technical specifications, and there's one page, setting explained for ProSTR, and then setting explained for BT as well. Here we go. Okay, so let's see. And we started thinking about designing a software product that would trade something valid, something persistent, and something real, and something that is not just the result of a fluke or random luck or chance, but something which is actually a observed pattern in crowd behavior. Now, there's a few of those. Human beings, when they gather to form a crowd, and financial markets are no exception, tend to display certain behavior. And this behavior is part of our beings, and they don't really change over time, at least very, very slowly. In this case, we have proof, or at least evidence, that this kind of behavior was already present in thousands of years ago, in Phoenician times, Persian times, clay tablets, and later on in the Dutch tulip mania and the British East India Company. There's all kinds of data where this kind of behavior has emerged. And of course, most recently, since the 1890s, we have exact data in the form of the Dow Jones Index. A lot of evidence that this is a behavior that is persistent. Now, what is this behavior? Well, with this software product, we focus on one specific behavior that we call the reemergence of momentum, that literature calls actually reemergence of momentum out of consolidation areas. Now, the popular name is pullback, but there's much more to it. We prefer to stick to the precise definition and the precise naming of this situation, which is the reemergence of momentum out of consolidation areas. Now, what does that mean? Well, in simple terms, when you look at any market action, the markets tend to move in waves. And these waves can take various forms, but what's common in them is that there is a momentum move, and then there's a certain consolidation, which means a pause, where the market seemed to not do much, and then often enough for us to do something about it, a next momentum move develops. And this is what we call the reemergence of momentum. And I might even give it a different color. So this is actually what we trade in our job. And this is actually what the software was designed to trade. Here we go. And there is an optimal entry point, of course, into this move, into this expected move. And that entry point is what we call the reemergence of momentum. And that reemergence of momentum is around here schematically, is when price starts to move out from this imaginary channel, the shape of which could be different. It's not always the same shape. That's why we call it the consolidation area, because it could be actually horizontal. It doesn't necessarily a sloping area. And of course, everything I say to the bullish side goes the same way to the downside as well. All right, so this is what we were wondering way back when. Can we design a software program that efficiently identifies, first of all, momentum moves, then consolidation areas, and then the reemergence of momentum. And later, of course, we knew right away, being traders, that we will have to design also trade management rules, because when we enter a trade, we're not going to be in that trade forever, and we will want to have trailing stops. So all kinds of actions need to be taken by the software automatically after we enter the trade. So actually, the activity has two stages: before the trade, before the trigger, before the entry, and after the entry. Now we know that that product exists, and these are called the standalones, and the most advanced form of the most automated and volatility adjusted smart, let's call it that way, form of the product is the BT. And why we have two versions or even three is another video. We have covered that in many other videos as well. So here's the point, and this is what the software product aims to trade. All right, let's move on and look at this little drawing here that I started our thought experiment with, which just describes the raw signal. And the raw signal, we recognize that this is a consolidation area that we will call a simple pullback or a simple consolidation area. And we will recognize that sometimes this simple zigzag area will turn into two zigzags looking like a W, and might even have three or even more zigzags before it attempts to make a move into the original direction. And now we are going to name these, and we're going to call this a simple pullback, and we're going to call everything that's not simple a complex pullback, which means two or more zigzags. The question becomes then, okay, we have zigzags, we have pullbacks, we have consolidation areas, but how much of a good thing is too much? So for example, the market goes like this, and this looks like okay, looks like a horizontal consolidation area. This looks like a usable area, but what if the pullback, is this something that I will want to consider trading to the upside? So the point is that we need to think of some kind of automated way, some kind of algorithmically programmable way to teach the software to recognize situations where the pullback might be too deep for our taste or to our liking, and we may not be interested in trading that in the same direction, because it could mean that momentum is emerging the other way around in the other direction, or the market might start to form a sideways consolidation area, a range-bound market, which generally is not something we want to trade, which is, in other words, called the choppy market. And the first question was, can we design an algorithm that would identify these consolidation areas, ideally differentiate between simple and complex pullbacks? At that time, we didn't know if it's possible. Now we do know that we have done it. But at that time, what we wanted to do is to think about ways to how we could program and automatically differentiate between simple pullbacks and complex pullbacks. That was one task we were thinking about. And then the second, as I've mentioned, is to define a way somehow in the code, some kind of filter that would filter out situations and potential triggers which are just too deep to our taste, too risky to take because momentum may have waned already, or momentum in the other direction may be developing. We call this the buffer zone. And the first thing and the first two things, and if you know the product, you know this already, we have achieved both these goals. Okay, so there will be more. I'm going to walk you through them, but let's start with these. Okay, so the first task was to define the consolidation areas, we've done that. Second job was to differentiate between simple and complex pullbacks. The software does that too. Beautiful. And then, as a first filter, the most dramatic or the most fundamental filter is that we don't want to trade triggers in which case the momentum most probably has already waned, and that's what we call the buffer zone. And we have done that too. By default, the buffer zone is switched on. Let me try to find a situation where the buffer zone may have already been at work. Okay, so here's a pullback area. Software correctly identifies the entry point. Here's another pullback. Okay, well, it's not bad. We did hit the upper Keltner, but then look what happens next. The next time, we almost touched the lower Keltner. Now, that is already something we're not interested in trading to the upside. These areas, when it touches the lower Keltner, it's not something, it's exactly the opposite. I want to consider a trade to the downside, not to the upside. Same thing here. And this is a situation, this last one here, where most likely the buffer zone kicked in and filtered out any potential long trades, simply because it's too much of a good thing. The pullback is too deep, didn't stop here, didn't go up from here. This is just too much of a good thing. So this is how the buffer zone works. And by default, it is switched on in our program. Now let me go back to our list, because then in this fashion, I'm going to walk you through a few more very smart, cool features of the program, of the software product, and then you will realize how you can think about how you can put all these functionalities and possibilities into your own trading. All right, so far we talked about simple pullbacks, complex pullbacks, so that's done. Then we talked about the buffer zone, that's done too. Now, the next question becomes, well, it's just the harsh reality of trading is that when I consider trading a pullback, as each of us knows, what happens often that I beautifully enter a trade to the long side, and gee, as soon as I enter it into the long trade, the market does this, which means, in other words, that the simple pullback that I entered is turning into a complex pullback. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's a fact of life. And then the question becomes, is it somehow possible to only enter simple pullbacks or only enter complex pullbacks? Now let's think about this for a second. Can I only trade simple pullbacks? Of course, it would be beautiful, because then I would save myself a lot of headaches. Now, it is possible in theory, because the software can differentiate and identify simple pullback. Problem is, though, that we have to note that any simple pullback can turn into a complex pullback after our entry. And, fact of life, whatever algorithm we build, even the best algorithm in the world, does not have access to data from the future. So when we make this decision to enter the market, we do not know the future yet. So it is not really possible to only enter simple pullbacks, because when we enter a simple pullback, it still has the potential into turning into a complex pullback after the entry. Now let's think about the other situation. Is it possible to only trade the complex pullbacks? And actually, many traders choose to do that. It saves a lot of headaches to the trader, because then look at this. Can I only trade complex pullbacks? And the answer is yes, you can. And something important we need to realize here is that once a pullback is complex, it cannot turn back into a simple pullback. So once you decide to only trade complex pullbacks, you're good. You can still get stopped out, although, of course, because a third or a fourth leg will be possible. So it doesn't mean that you will not have losing trades, of course, but potentially a chunk of losing trades you will filter out, because you will not take these trades at all, the simple pullbacks. Now, Some traders may be comfortable with this. Some other traders, it could be a somewhat frustrating experience, because what will happen is that you will skip many good trades and you will have to sit through many good moves because you're just simply not taking the simple pullbacks. But many of these simple pullbacks will just work beautifully. So it's a trade-off, and in trading and in life in general, everything's a trade-off. Nothing is free. So if you want something, you have to give up something. But that's okay. We can find a good balance here. So this is just one option in the software. Again, something that we considered right up front to differentiate between the two types of pullbacks, simple and complex, and then giving you the option to either just trade both, or just switch on the simple pullbacks, or just switch on the complex pullbacks. But just remember, if you switch on the simple pullback, after the entry, you can still end up being in a complex pullback. If you only trade the complex pullback, you can be rest assured that a complex pullback will never turn back into a simple one. And after this little introduction, the foundations, we can turn our attention to the other smart filters that we have built into the product to make our job easier. Now, what are these functionalities in the software? The next one is the trend filter, because what we want to realize is that there will be consolidation areas on the market. That's just market behavior. But just because there's a consolidation, that's not enough for us to be interested, because what we want that consolidation area to be within a trend. So if the trend goes this way, I'm not interested in consolidation areas in the other direction. So I only want consolidation areas which are in sync with the trend, which is defined, and it is defined by the software. And that's what we call a trend filter. So that's the first filter, important additional filter in the software, the trend filter, which ensures that we only trade consolidation areas in the direction of the trend and not the other way around. Now, what's the next one? The next one is the chop filter. The chop filter is a little similar, but also a little different from the buffer zone. The buffer zone, let me just revisit the buffer zone and highlight the difference between these two. The buffer zone is making sure that when we see a dramatic change in price action, in other words, price touching the opposite Keltner, then the long trades will be switched off. That's all. The chop filter, however, does something else. Let me just show it to you. The chop filter does this. There's a trend, and then the momentum wanes, and then we slowly turn into a sideways action. The chop filter watches price action in real time and will start to filter out and suppress signals in sideways consolidation areas. In other words, the choppy areas. So that's what the chop filter does. All right, so now we have covered the trend filter. We have covered the chop filter. Let's move on. There's also a time filter. Well, the most obvious example, certain traders may not want to be in a position at news release, for example, 8:30 Eastern time. Many news items come out, or 10:30 every Wednesday, the CL energy, CL oil-related news comes out, and you may not want to be in a trade at that time. Many traders define let's say 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after the news releases, I don't want to be in a trade. Same thing might go for the FOMC once a month, 2 p.m. on Wednesdays. You may not want to be in a trade. Okay, that's fine. The time filter allows that. Also, you may just want to have a lunch break, perhaps, or just not want to trade the lunch session, the lunch hours in New York time, or maybe you don't want to trade after hours or overnight trades. You can filter those times, those potential signals on the market by simply using a time filter. It's as simple as that. So now we have already defined 3 filters, and let's move on to the next one. The next filter, which is built into the software, is the number of signals. Because consider this, okay, we define the trend, that's fine, but you see, everything is lagging. The trend definition is certainly lagging because if price does this, it will take more price data before the trend definition algorithm, however good it is, will decide that the trend is over. Now that there's a little lag in there. However, number of signals, there's no lag, because if you decide that you only want to take 2, 3, and 4, or maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're not interested in more signals in the same trend, then you can simply define the number of signals you are willing to take in a trend, a maximum number of signals. And actually, there's one more little subset here in the number of signals, because you can not only define the number of signals in a trend, but you can also define the space between the signals, because you may not want to take a signal on every candle or every second candle. You might want to give it a little room. By default, I think it could be 5 or 10, which means you get a signal, you have to wait 10 candles before the software will give you another signal. All right, so that has to do with numbering the signals and numbering the bars between the signals. The next one, which I think is very useful in many situations, is the auto shutoff, which means that you can define in the software that let's say I take a trade and then I only want to take 2 more trades in that session and then no more trades. You can tell the software to switch itself off after X number of trades. Now that X can be 1 or could be 100, it's up to you. And then I left, well, probably the most advanced one, which is in BT only last. I left that last, the risk filter, which is volatility adjusted risk management rules, which means that the software will skip trades automatically, which would violate your risk management rules. And this is crucial. We as human beings, we can get greedy. We are liable to making mistakes. The software will not make mistakes. If that given trade would violate your risk management rules, which you defined, let's say on a Saturday with a cool head when the market was closed, the software would not take that trade. So risk filter, risk management rules, you can switch it on. It's not mandatory. You can keep it switched off if you want, but you can define risk management rules for yourself. And then the trading strategy, as you trade, all these filters, all these settings will have a compound effect, and you will not take trades which would endanger actually your account size. So that's how it works. Powerful functionality. And I left last what is the human filter. And we need to recognize and remember that all these filters are all optional and depend on the trader. So it's all up to you which one you use, how you use them, whether you use them all or you just use a few of them. So this is all here for you to consider. But there's one more, the human filter, which means if you're in a trade or when you're in a trading session, there's no obligation to trade. As you know from many of our videos, if you know our software, you know that we have a button, the so-called blue button, which you can actually, let me show it to you, you can switch off anytime. If you have a coffee break or if you have a headache or need to make a phone call, you always in total control of the strategy. And I'm going to demonstrate it quickly. So I switch on BT. I put BT on the chart. Here we go. And here is the button. And now it's switched on. So if there should be a signal, the program would take it and I would find myself in a trade. But again, I can always switch it off. So the human control is always maintained and never taken away. So I hope this little review demonstrates the power and the potential. And I encourage you to think about all these and design your own procedure, trading process, which is by definition must be individual. Most obvious factor, of course, is the account size, but there's many other factors, time zone, time frame, other things in life, jobs, free time, even age or financial situation. There's so many factors for each of us that need to be considered here. But I think it's a challenging and very noble task to think through these and come up with the settings which work best for you, test them, of course, and the software allows you to save this as a template. So you, of course, you don't have to think about this every day. Once you decide on the settings, you just save them as a template and maybe review them once a month in light of your monthly results. All right, so I hope this helps. And let us know if you have any questions, and perhaps we'll revisit these topics and each individual component of the system in more detail in later videos. Thank you very much, and mindful trading.